Today we're in the garage and we're going to talk about tire rotation. Stick around. So this video is more for the novice, people just getting into working on their own automobiles. I just want to go over my tips and pros and cons, my thoughts on tire rotation. So if you're new to it, this is probably a good place to start. So like I said, tire rotations. There's two different kinds of tire rotations. You've got 4-tire and 5-tire. If you're carrying a spare on the back of your Jeep or in your truck that's a full size, in other words, that tire is exactly the same size as what you're running right now on the street, I suggest a 5-tire rotation. Why? Why would you want to do that? Well, for one thing, it's pretty important that all your tires wear in about the same rate. So if you get 40,000 miles out of a set of tires and you throw a 5th tire into the rotation, you get like 20% more distance out of that set of tires. With a 4-tire rotation, maybe you don't have a spare. Maybe you're one of the ones that likes to go slick back on your Jeeps and you don't want to carry a spare. I get it. I do. It's extra weight. It kind of looks goofy with a tire back there. And if you've done everything, to delete the spare and put a tramp stamp on your tailgate and all that stuff, I get it. Perhaps you're towing your rig to the trails, what have you. I personally don't recommend that, simply because if you have a flat on the trail and you can't fix it, how are you gonna get off the trail? Then you gotta start calling buddies and everything else. This video isn't a step-by-step. There's plenty of other videos on YouTube that will, take you through the process of changing your tires. I would recommend Trail Recon or Auto Edits. They have videos specifically for Jeeps. Find a video that suits the vehicle that you're looking at or that you're working on. This video is for that person who wants to do their own maintenance, maybe in their driveway or in their garage. It's not for the person that's going to run down to, Discount Tire or Walmart and have them do it. How often should you do a tire rotation? Well, that depends. It depends on what kind of tires you're running. What kind of distance are you driving on a regular basis? Let me start with tire types. So if you're running a mud terrain with the big lugs on it, you probably want to start thinking about rotating tires at 3,000, 3,500 miles. And the reason for that is mud tires tend to wear fairly unevenly. It's not the case for all of them, but for most of them. If you're running an all-terrain tire, you could probably go 5,000 miles. It's up to you. Some people do it at every oil change. Some people, they just do it at 10,000 miles and call it good. It's up to you. It's up to you to, inspect your tires. If they're wearing funny, rotate them. So what about the hybrid tires? Well, I don't have a lot of experience with hybrid tires. They're a combination between a mud terrain and an all-terrain. They tend, in my observation, they tend to wear pretty well. So you might be able to get away with an all-terrain type schedule of 5,000 to 10,000 miles. You just got to inspect them. So why make a video if there's other videos out there? Well, I might be able to connect with somebody differently than maybe one of the other YouTubers. So, I'm going to give pros and cons and tips and tricks and just throw my musings out there. And, if it helps you, great. I hope it does. So one of the most important aspects of working on a vehicle is safety. I don't recommend just jacking up an end of your vehicle and working on it. Please, for the love of God, get some jack stands. They're not that expensive. You can get them at Harbor Freight, Walmart, any one of the auto repair or auto parts places. Just get yourself at least one set of jack stands, but I recommend 2 sets so you can completely elevate your vehicle. That said, cinder blocks are not acceptable. Do not put your vehicle on blocks and get underneath it. Cinder blocks are actually pretty fragile when you start putting pressure points on them. Bricks, same thing. Don't use bricks. If you've got to crib up your vehicle, use wood. It's the more stable material, other than a jack stand. But you really need to take safety into consideration anytime you're working on a vehicle. One of the most important things beyond safety is develop a routine. A routine? I mean, we're just rotating tires, right? Well, if you develop a routine, you do the same thing over and over and over again, you'll know when you've done something incorrectly. So for instance, when I'm bolting a wheel onto my Jeep, I always start with my wheel lock, and I'll put that in a position, and then I'll put the next lug nut on just like the way I would tighten it. So I would go clockwise, skipping one lug, putting on the next lug nut. Then I would skip the next one and then put on the next lug nut. I do that for all 5 of them on every wheel every single time. So not only does that help you during a rotation, but if you have to change your tire on the side of the road and you've already got this routine set, then you'll know if you've got something messed up. Something won't be right. You'll be like, well, I better go back and check everything. Since you have the vehicle up and the wheels off, you might as well inspect while you're under there. So inspect your brake lines for leaks, fraying, cracking. If you have a newer vehicle that has wheel speed sensors on it, just make sure that the wiring's in good shape. Also, I recommend highly that since you got the wheel off anyway, inspect your brakes. You can just look at the backside of the caliper where it's on the edge of the rotor, and you can see how much brake material you have left. Now's a good time to also check your oil. If you don't regularly check your oil, like in the old days, people used to do it every single day, but engines got better. This is a good time to go ahead and pull the dipstick and see where you're at. There's other fluids to check in there too. While you've got the hood up, might as well go ahead and check your brake fluid. A good indicator there is if your brake fluid is low, you better be inspecting your brakes, because brake fluid just doesn't disappear unless you've got a leak or you've got severe wear on your brake pads. Inspect. Also, go ahead and top off your windshield wiper fluid. Check your battery connections. It's nothing major. You're just doing a quick inspection. You'll know when something doesn't look correct. So might as well go ahead and take care of it. So the question is, do I need an impact wrench? Well, no, not necessarily, but you better have a breaker bar, because the JL's lug nut specification is 120 foot-pounds, and that's pretty beefy. So I would recommend at the very least having a breaker bar with a properly sized socket for your lug nuts, and do it that way. Me, I'll go ahead and zip them off with an impact wrench because I have one. Along those same lines, I don't recommend driving on your lug nuts with an impact wrench at full speed. And what I mean by that is I always finger tighten my lug nuts first, and then I have a impact wrench that has 3 settings on it, and I'll use the lowest setting just to snug everything up. I don't put an extra ugga-dugga in there. Don't do that. Get yourself a torque wrench. They're not that expensive, but I will tell you, you will use a torque wrench the entire time you own a Jeep. It's just that important. So get a good one. Don't get a piece of crap. Get a Craftsman or a Cobalt. You can go to Tractor Supply. They have the Tectons. That's what I've got. It works great. You should always have a decent set of tools. I'm not talking expensive. You can go to Harbor Freight. You can get their tool kits, but you need something. If you're going to be out on the trail, you really should be carrying tools with you. So that goes into the whole routine thing. My routine is, making sure that I've got my tools. I've got my, my refrigerator's plugged in and pre-chilled, and yeah, I got a fridge. I'll show you that in a later video. Also, I carry recovery gear. I got a really nice system for carrying all that stuff, but that's all kind of part of my routine, just to make sure I have all that stuff. Do you need an expensive jack? No, you don't. You need a jack that's capable of doing what it is you're trying to accomplish. I don't really like the stock scissor jacks. They work. You can certainly use that. But what I've got is, even before I owned a Jeep, which has been like 8 or 9 years, I bought a high reach floor jack for like 80 bucks from Harbor Freight. And I've used the crap out of that thing. I use it all the time. So make sure you've got a good jack. You can even use a bottle jack if you got enough cribbing underneath it to lift up high enough. On the subject of torque wrenches, find out what your vehicle's specification is for torque on the lug nuts and use a torque wrench and go around and make sure that everything's tightened up. And you want to probably check it after about 100 miles or so, just to make sure. The normal tire rotation on any vehicle is to take the back wheels and put them on the front and crisscross the front ones to the rear. With a 5-tire rotation, it's a little bit different. You would take the spare and it would go to the right rear. The right rear would go to the right front. The right front would cross over to the left rear. The left rear would go to the left front, and the left front tire would go onto your spare tire rack. My particular routine is to first take off the spare tire, then I would jack up the front of my vehicle, make sure your parking brake is set and you're in gear, either park or first or second gear if you have a manual. Then once the front is in the air and on jack stands, I would jack up the rear. And the reason for that is my driveway is on a slight incline. It's nothing drastic. But if I pick up the rear of my Jeep, the next thing I know, I'm sliding downhill with the front tires not locked and my jack's on rollers. So that's the way I do it. That's part of my routine. I always do it the same way. You could chalk up the tires if you wanted to and do it the opposite. You could go ahead and just chalk your tires, jack up the rear, jack up the front, do whatever you want to do. Just make sure your routine is the same every single time. So anyway, I'll go ahead and take that spare tire off. Then I would do jack and support my vehicle. Then I would run around and take all the lug nuts off. Then I would run around and pull all the wheels off and roll them to their next destination. Now, I'm kind of old. It gets hot here in Arizona. So the first thing I'm going to do is lift that big ass 37-inch tire on bead locks and put it on a spare tire rack before I run out of gas for the rest of it. That thing is about 125 pounds each wheel tire combination. So I go ahead and take care of the spare first. Then I'll run around. And I always, like I said, I always do it the same way every single time. I'll go to the right rear, install that wheel, go ahead and snug up the lug nuts finger tight. Then I'll take my impact wrench on its lowest setting and just snug them up. I'm not putting Ugga Duggas in there. Like I said before, no Ugga Duggas, don't do that. Then, since I'm starting on the rear, it's in park, and the parking brake is set, I can go ahead and torque those wheels, those lug nuts up at that point. So I'll go ahead and do that. Then I'll run up to the right front, install the wheel, same process, same clockwise rotation, skipping, every other lug. Go ahead and install my lug nuts, finger tight, lowest setting on the impact wrench. But the front, there's nothing holding that wheel still, and you're not going to get 120 foot-pounds on a free spinning wheel. So a couple things you can do. You can go ahead and put your transfer case into 4-high. That locks up everything together. Or you just leave it the way it is for now. Go around and do the driver's side front. Same thing. You can't torque that one down yet. And then I'll get the last rear tire put on. And then what I'll do is, I'll get the vehicle on the ground backwards. So I'll go ahead and get the rear of the vehicle placed back on the ground. Then I'll come around to the front, take the jack stands out from underneath it, lower it just enough so that the tires are just touching the pavement and they're not going to roll around on you. And then go ahead and torque it down then. You don't want to get full weight on that before torquing because they may not situate themselves quite right. So go ahead and torque them before full weight is on the wheels and then let it all the way down. One other thing I'd like to cover is the difference between hub-centric and lug-centric. If you're new to Jeeps, you may have heard that bantered about a little bit. On a hub-centric wheel, which JLs and JKs are, There's actually a raised portion in the center of the hub that a wheel that's designed specifically for that model will sit on, so that the wheel is actually sitting on that lip as opposed to being hung there on the lug nuts, around the lugs. With a lug-centric wheel, the lug nuts are actually what centers the wheel onto the hub. So if you're just, if you've got a hub-centric vehicle, you can still use lug-centric wheels. Just got to make sure that the bore is larger than the lip that's on your hub. Most of them are. They usually use larger bore centers on aftermarket wheels. So then it becomes vitally important that the way you put your lug nuts on is consistent. So that's the reason I finger tight, lowest setting on the impact, torque them down. That'll center them up. That's the reason the lug nuts are cone shaped. Can you use a lug-centric wheel on a hub-centric vehicle? Yeah, I do. My KMC machetes they're not hub-centric, they're lug-centric. But I still have hub-centric hubs on there, you know, so it's not a big deal if you want to go that route. Some people are just absolutely, you know, militant about using hub-centric wheels on your vehicle if you have a hub-centric vehicle. It's not that important. Where it is really important is if you're using wheel spacers. But if you've got a hub-centric vehicle and you want to put wheel spacers on, absolutely use hub-centric spacers. I'm from the camp that I don't want to use spacers. So I got, you know, the offset built into my wheel that I wanted for clearance and stuff like that. I'm not anti-wheel spacers, just not my cup of tea. I just think there's better ways. Well, hopefully this video has been helpful to you. I know I didn't do a lot of, you know, step-by-step procedures. There's other people that do that. There's at least 10 videos on Jeeps Alone out there doing wheel rotations. I just wanted to throw my musings out there, my tips and tricks, my pros and cons, and hopefully you have gotten something out of this that's going to help you in your future endeavors working on your Jeeps. Till next time.